So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our latest uh, Indic Book Club Author Q&A. And this time we have Shailendra Marathe, author of Price to Profit. And before we get started, I am going to give everyone a minute or two more to join. And for those of you who are joining, this is also going to be streamed live on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Indic Book Club. So give me 1 minute while I switch this live on Facebook also. So Shailendra, a big welcome to you and thank you for coming on our IBC Author Q&A series. Now, for those of you who are not yet familiar with Shailendra, here is a quick a word of introduction about him. So Shailendra is a senior finance professional and he has more than 25 years of experience in business finance, financial markets, fintech and risk management. He's a chartered accountant by training and an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, where he was awarded the gold medal for best all-round performance in his postgraduate batch. And he has written a book called Price to Profit. And he says that most entrepreneurs are price takers who accept the price set by the market and generate profits by driving efficiencies and reducing costs. They do not realize the power of pricing, and in case they are aware, do not know which existing strategies they can leverage in their business. So implementing a pricing strategy for a business that is already in existence has its own challenges and complexities. This book explains why pricing is important, how it impacts business growth and profitability, which pricing strategies are being used by businesses, which challenges are faced in implementing business strategies, how to assess your current pricing strategy, and recommends an approach to execute a pricing strategy in your business. So, Shailendra, uh,
Yes,
my very first question to you would be that uh, we all know pricing. We are all, whether we are part of business, we have a say or influence to some degree in setting the price for the products or services that we sell. And every single day when we go out in the market, when we go online shopping, we compare prices of almost every good and product that we buy.
yeah,
So when you start off your book, you talk about the fact that pricing is growth plus profitability. So let us start from there. Uh, you know, why are these two important, growth and profitability? Because, and I'll tell you why. See, in the last several years, we have seen big companies become huge and successful without ever running, creating a single paisa of profit. So people have got used to free delivery and free trial and free product and all. Why should people, as who are in business, care about pricing?
great question. So I think probably there are two, three questions inside that. So when you are talking of the companies, not bothered about making price, probably you are referring to Amazon's, Flipkarts, and Swiggy's and others of the world, right? So we have to understand that these are different kind of businesses. The stakeholders who are backing those and investing, right? They have very very deep pockets. So if you look at these kind of companies, they're probably less than 0.5% of the total enterprises, or probably even less than that, right? who can afford to pump in so much money and then wait for 5 years or 10 years to break even. That's one thing. So are we a part of that particular community? Do I have that kind of money to back up, or else then I need to be worried about profitability, right? That's very simple and straightforward answer at the beginning. Second, these companies have different goals. So, for example, they want the largest market share. If you look at Google, also it was not really. It figured out along the way, how do they want to make money, right? Same with Facebook. We started as a sort of implemented in a college, right, just for friends to connect, etc. And then scaled up, invested a lot, and then they figured out how to make money. Of course, they had idea. I'm not saying they were not knowing anything at all, but they are different kind of companies which, and then they have become sort of monopolies. When you talk of online community, it is Facebook, right, or something to post online by way of visual, it is Instagram. So everybody has nicely carved out a position for themselves, and their game is about total dominance. And this is possible only in maybe the tech driven kind of situation. So in technology, it is sort of winner takes all kind of a thing has been possible. But if you look at other businesses, which is, let's say, even Coca-Cola, for example, right? It's a very big business. It's a very dominant business, but probably it's not even 5% of the global, cold drinks and other drinks sale, correct? In spite of being one of the biggest, I have to check that out. But I can assure you, it's not even 5% of the global, right? So while being number one player, they are a very insignificant or a small player. So even Coke is bothered about profitability. So unless you are really going for probably 30, 40, 60, 80% kind of a market share, and your business allows you to do that, then I think you should still be bothered about profitability. And only focusing on growth, there is a limit to how much cash you can pump in. And while we are looking at success stories like Flipkart, Amazon, and few which are still running and having a steam, so to say, there are many which fail by the side, right? I think you can tell many names. So many e-commerce players have shut shop, right? So, and they were not making profit. So while we are looking at these two three guys who are actually sort of garnering market share like crazy, the others have shut shop. Probably, I don't know, there were 20, 30, 100 of them, correct? So that's the reason we need to bother about the profitability while we are growing.
Very, very, very true. And you talk about communicating value through price, right? And you take a couple of examples. I think right at the in the first parts of the book, you use the example of an online site that where you can go and configure your car and you can add options and all that. And there is a default that is shown. And obviously, I as a consumer can change and add or do all of those things. But I was a little fascinated by that. How does one communicate value through price? And I think in those defaults, I sensed there is some reference you're making also to Daniel Kahneman's work on how people perceive and the value. So uh, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, in fact, it is good you mentioned Daniel Kahneman. I read him probably, I think, a decade back or so, right? And I was very fascinated by the kind of experiments he has done. And on Discovery, they had a serial, I think, Brain Games, which showed those, right? How exactly, those experiments were getting done and implemented. So he has done a lot of research around how the system one and system two works, right? So lot of decisions we take based on our initial perception of what the things are. So I don't remember the exact example you are saying, but I think that default I was talking about in Tesla's case, where if you go to their website, when you look at the car prices, the default price which is shown is net of the the benefits that are there. For example, like reducing the the carbon footprint, right? Something like that. Which actually, I mean, they are quantifying it somehow, but that's not the benefit to me directly, but they're reducing that and showing the price to me, right? So they are trying to manipulate it in such a way that the price looks lower. And then there is another tab, and you can go and see a higher price, which actually you have to pay for the car, right? That's one thing. So the way the defaults work, for example, I'll give you another example. When I was in Australia, there was one very big reform. There were two key reforms going on in the financial markets. That's about 8, 10 years back. One was called Future of Financial Advice, and second was called Stronger Super. Both were around the financial advice and how to protect the savings of the Australians for retirement. More focused on that. So in that, what the Australian government did or the financial authorities did is that they mandated that any planner who's setting a profile of the employees, they should go and set up the default plan in a certain way. Earlier, what used to happen is when the company engages a financial planner or a wealth management firm, right? Let's say a company has 3,000 employees. When you join that company, and at that point in time, you are choosing a plan, correct? How do you want to invest the whatever part of equivalent of provident fund over there? And then at that time, the option default which was there, it was a costly option for the employee, right? But the way the defaults work is most people don't change the default, right? That's why it is called default, right? It's a given. I mean, most of us live with the default. So it was causing a lot of harm to the investor community, and they did a lot of research, to show that low cost actually translates into higher returns over 20, 30, 40 years. Because 1% that you can save by way of advisor fees can have a significantly higher impact over a longer time horizon specifically. So that's how the defaults work. The default that you are shown, for example, like if you go to Amazon and you look at the way the pricing is shown, right? There's a price which is in gray, and then is stuck off, and then there is a larger bold front. I think I have given the example in the book that the large and large font and red color, right? So the actual price, then there is a 74% kind of a saving, which is screaming in front of our eyes. Right? We can
Right.
very easily see that. Of course, Amazon has mellowed down a bit, but some sites will, even exaggerate to appeal to you. So this is the kind of a positioning and manipulation that can be done in terms of how you communicate the price. The second thing you asked about is about the value. Definitely price does convey the value, right? If for example a Mercedes car, for example, it is possible for Mercedes to produce very low value cars, right? I don't know whether probably they might have so much of great engineering that they might compete where Tata Nano failed, right? It is possible. I don't know. I'm just sort of exaggerating a little bit here and there. But they won't get into that segment because their positioning is very clear. Mercedes is supposed to be a premium car. They have bought in relatively low value cars in Indian market, but still it's on the premium end, right? I think the lowest model starts around 30, 35 lakhs, something like that. Again, if you look at BMW bikes as an example, right? Somebody who really wants to convey something to others when he is driving that bike will buy that bike. So there's a value that is implicit in there, and they are also conveying it through a price. And value-based pricing is a big thing. I think separately we can talk about that, or if you want, I can give examples.
Correct. So, with that, it makes for a very logical segue. In your book, what I really liked about your book is that you're very, very focused on the aspect of pricing, and you have divided your book into, I think, 14 or 15 chapters, and each one of them is looking at one aspect of pricing. So one of the and we'll talk about one part of it that I'm very fascinated, which is the types of pricing and the advantages and disadvantages of traditional forms of pricing. But coming to this part, I want to talk about you know see if you look at uh, you talked about Mercedes coming, not wanting to come low end. And I think you have a very, very interesting quote that anyone can sell a Mercedes at the price of a Hyundai, but doing the other way is really a challenge.
Correct.
So in here, my question is that how does one get pricing power then, right? So obviously a Mercedes can charge whatever it does an insane amount of money, because it is able to convince people of the other part of pricing, which is value.
Correct.
So how does someone who's not a Mercedes or a BMW or one of those luxury car makers, how do they get into communicating and convincing people of value?
Right. So value, like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? If I feel there is a value somewhere, I feel it. And I can give you a number of products where really I don't think any value is there, but I see people buying those at exorbitant price, correct? That's one thing, how you said. So basically pricing is about positioning. It's about, it is a very key part of positioning yourself. And as we, know about the basics, positioning is in the mind of the customer, how customer perceives you, right? It's not that Hyundai cannot produce very, premium cars. I think they can also do that. They have been doing fantastic engineering. But then operating at two different sort of price levels, entirely two different sort of positions, and while maintaining the same brand is very very difficult challenge to do. So if you look at one of the biggest the clothing companies, men's clothing companies in India, they have couple of brands, right? And at the Arvind Mills, for example, right? So we don't know how many brands that can they run all those brands very very successfully, but they have different brands. At times there are three shops nearby, and all these three in the back end it is just one company, but they have three different brands. And in the clothing brands, we don't bother much about who's the manufacturer, right? Whereas in the case
True.
of a car, we do more research. It's a high ticket purchase, so it is difficult for those people to have one company in the background and have various brands. It's difficult. But if you look at companies like Volkswagen, for example, the kind of brands that they are almost across also. They have right from Beetle or some other cars which are relatively low end, and now we have models starting from 5 lakhs 6 lakhs for Volkswagen in India, right? So they are able to maintain that. They have very high end positioned cars as well, so they are able to manage that kind of a thing. But that's very rare in the market, that with the same company in the background you are able to manage a highly premium positioning as well as a mass market positioning, because it is about the mind of the customer. And once the customer positions you as something, and that's why pricing decisions should be taken at the earlier stage, earlier life cycle. I'm not saying day one. Of course business grows slowly, but and then pricing policy should be aligned to your strategic positioning and other aspects. I'll not use those that jargon words too much, but unfortunately, I have to use it in this context, and how you convey that value. I'll just give another example. Uh, there is this Wagh Bakri chai, if you know that, right? It's a brand from Gujarat, and I think it's doing good business now. If I remember correctly, I think Amitabh used to advertise for that some time back. I'm not too sure, but they have also opened the tea outlets now, right? And I somehow don't like coffee. People can tell me anything can happen over coffee, anything can happen over tea, masala, lassi or anything, right? So I don't really get that kind of a thing when people say that. So I was very happy that now a tea brands are getting positioned in the same way. It's also another drink that we have very frequently. Somehow coffee could be sold easily because it's more Western concept, and we always accept Western things more sort of readily as compared to what is there in India for a very long time. So they are now able to sell a chai at 100 right? Same
Oh,
price as
okay.
coffee. Yeah. So आप वहाँ गोपरी चाय में जाओगे आपको सब वही experience मिलेगा. They'll give some cookies, proper decor, good tea, and you can sit for longer time. Same as coffee day or barista or any other kind of a experience, and they are able to sell that because they have Wagh Bakri when they launched this particular thing. I mean, their tea is one thing. When they launched those tea outlets, they decided this is the position in which we are going to be there. They could as well as have gone mass market, right? 20 rupees, 30 rupees tea. They could have done that, but they decided that we want to be in this particular position, and then they are conveying value accordingly.
Interesting. Now, continuing with this thread for a little more. Now, see, unless and until you are a monopoly or a duopoly player in a market, you really cannot dictate price to a customer. But you also have, this very fascinating another quote from Warren Buffett, who says that if you can raise, I think, if you can raise prices by 10%,
Yeah.
and not have to worry, then you have you are in a good business. But if you have to pray, then
Hmm.
you are in trouble.
True.
So how do you create pricing power? Because the customer is always going to comparison shop, and at the end of the day, even I am someone who will look at lower prices as one of the first differentiators and
Correct.
determinants. So how do you build pricing power in that case?
Yeah. So I think, yeah. So just in Warren Buffett's context, he invested in companies like Coca-Cola, looking at the fact that something as mundane as cola, right? Coca-Cola has been able to make a big deal out of it and sell. I am again not able to ever understand why people drink Coca-Cola, but that apart. So uh, it's about how the company positions itself and how it differentiates himself. See, if you are selling a product which is like a commodity, right, then it is very difficult, because then people will directly compare your product with somebody else, right? Because end of the day it's about value and what you make people perceive about it. So what you have to what is mandatory for you is to create a differentiated product as compared to the competition. You should make it difficult for your customer to compare one for one with the competition. That is very key requirement, because unless you are able to differentiate, as I told you about this Wagh Bakri example, I'm very sure they could have launched mass market outlets. Probably they would have got, I don't know what profitability they're having, probably could have broken even faster, and have had higher sales also, right? Because then it's a mass thing that any of us can consume. So that's a decision to be taken. And I think again, just the same example to repeat that, I think there are so many tea outlets, right? Why should somebody be going and paying 150 there for a chai? In Starbucks, for example, when Starbucks opened in Pune 2 3 years back, I was surprised. I mean, I used to go to Starbucks in US and London and every place, but I never thought it's such a great deal. I mean, there's no other option there, so I'll go to Starbucks. But here, in Pune, we had long queues in Kothurud, right? Big queues. When McDonald's came here, I think it was year 2000 in Jangli Maharaj Road. There were such huge queues, like people were waiting outside that. So it's about perception. But now today, Starbucks in India, I mean the same. It's a really commodity product, right? What is it different? The brand is different, but they are able to create that perception about value in the minds of the customer. So I don't think just because the product is a mass market product or a commodity product, or you have to, I don't agree that you have to be a monopoly player in order to differentiate the price. And in fact, in many times the monopoly becomes a problem, because if you raise the price too much, people start shouting a lot against that, right? And this is exactly happening and will happen against these tech monopolies as well. People will question why they are charging x amount, y amount, so on and so forth.
Interesting. So even for essentially products that are commoditified, it is possible to gain some pricing power, you're saying, if you
Absolutely.
can create if you can essentially differentiate your product and offering.
Absolutely. Look at Raymond as an example, right? I mean, there's so many shooting shirtings available, correct? I think CRMs is available. There are other brands which are available. It's a very commodity thing. Shirting, shooting, do you have to really go somewhere and look for that, correct? But the way Raymond has altogether positioned itself in the complete man, and the way that they have targeted the wedding segment.
Right.
And also, interestingly, now that you're talking about it, I just wrote a post about 2 3 months back on LinkedIn on how Raymond is using something called a Detroit effect, right?
Uh,
What
uh,
they've done is
what?
Detroit effect.
Okay.
Uh,
What is
yeah,
it?
what it talks about is create a very clear positioning, right, and establish yourself in that particular position. What Raymond has done is it has very clearly differentiated itself as a suitings and shirtings company, right? So if you are thinking of a marriage suit or something special, you go to Raymond's, right, in that category, right? Of course, Reed and Taylor, etc. have come. I don't know how well they are competing with Raymond's, but it's very difficult for anybody to think of even competing with Raymond's. And then what they are doing is they are getting the customer there, and then they are selling many other products. They are selling handkerchiefs, socks, ties, right? Everything they are selling now. Right? They are selling many products. They are selling T-shirts. So they are selling casual shirts, right, which are not really office shirts. But still, if you look at their advertisement, the positioning is always, if you are a high-flying executive, you should, or if it's an important occasion like marriage, you should wear Raymond's. That is what they do to pull people in, and then they sell premium products over there, right? Their belts are costing like 1200 bucks and so, and probably same one you can get outside for 3 400 bucks. And I'm not doing a really exact comparison, I'm not so scientific about it. Wallets you can buy there for 600 800. Now, have you ever seen anyone advertising about wallets, belts, socks, right, handkerchiefs? No, but they're able to sell that once you get the customer in the place. And that they've achieved by creating a very niche, premium, and really a position that others find it very difficult to compete with.
Interesting. This is
And this clothing is a commodity market, believe me. I mean, I really don't know, but I
of
still go to
course.
Raymond, right? So that's what they've done. So
This is fascinating. I had not thought about it that way, that by creating this very very and suits and all, Raymond is able to push so many other products that they will. In fact, you're right. I've never seen. I can't recall them ever having talked about the fact that they're selling handkerchiefs and other
correct,
things.
correct.
Very fascinating.
So
You know,
that will dilute their positioning. They want to stick to the positioning and then sell on top of it.
interesting. So you talk about one of the three fundamentals of a business. So you have to have a product, which means you have to have some amount of a skill set inventing something that is unique and which you think gives delivers value. The second thing you talk about is salesmanship. If you have a product and if no one buys it, it's of no use, right? So you say that you have to be
Absolutely.
able to sell it. And the third part you talk about is pricing, and obviously that's the whole theme of the book, and that's what we've been talking about. But so far we have talked about the fact that our discussion so far has essentially centered around how do you differentiate your brand, how do you get pricing power, how do you make the customer see value at at a higher price point. But I wanted to tell us a little bit about the converse part of it. And you use an example of Chinese vehicle manufacturers that entered the Australian car market, and they were priced, somewhat cheaper than the other cars available. And everyone expected them in a period of 5 to 10 years to get up to a 10% or a greater market share. But you write that after many years, their entire market share was hovering at about 1%.
Yes.
Now, this is very counterintuitive, right? If we keep saying that you want to charge higher for higher, profits and all of that, here is a set of car companies that are charging $1.
Correct. So going back to positioning again, I think the car was, I think Holden, no, Holden is Australia's homegrown brand. Sorry, it is MG, I think, which is same now being sold in India, correct? So the positioning itself was such that first thing they have to understand that Australians are very proud about themselves, right? It's a country where convicts were settled by the British, but the kind of pride that Australians carry, I wonder why Indians are not we are not proud about ourselves, right? We have so much to be proud about, but look at the country which where the convicts were sent from Britain, and they take so much pride. And when you go to Australian shops, sometimes they write the history. My great grandfather was convict and sent out here for this reason, right? And they talk proudly about it. So I think the country which has this kind of a pride will find it difficult to buy a car and display on the road to their neighbors and other communities, saying that okay, we are buying a car because it is cheaper, right? So second, there's a perception about Chinese goods, and I think China has not been able to wash it out completely, right? I don't know, post COVID, I mean that's another tangent altogether, but that perception of sort of relatively cheap products, right? Cheap, not low cost products, has not gone out. So that could be one reason they were not able to break out of that. There could be perception about those cars not being safe, because in Australia, even in Sydney, for example, on highways you have the speed of 90 kilometers or 100 kilometers. Outside it's about 120 kilometers, right? So you must feel safe while driving that car. So probably I'm assuming those kind of issues were there. I've not studied it that much, but I said, just by keeping the price low, you will not be able to essentially acquire larger market share, because people will always compare, instead of buying this new car which is a Chinese made car, I don't mind buying a 4-year-old second hand Toyota, right, which is proven, because Toyota's engine will run for at least 2 or 3 lakh kilometers, or maybe couple of lakh miles, right? So that's how people will compare in their mind. So having only lower price is not a guarantee that you will gain larger market share, and you will be able to achieve profitability in the end. That's why one has to be cautious. Probably they were to price it right, they could have probably sold more. It's a similar thing, I think. I read couple of case studies on why Nano failed, right? So they said that it was priced so cheap that people didn't feel that though they didn't want their neighbors and community to see my family car, and which was priced so low, almost as low as an auto rickshaw, right? That's where some kind of they didn't understand that pride element that is there in the society about owning a car, right? At least in India and maybe in few other countries. In US, it's like probably more of a necessity. Probably a Nano equivalent might sell there. Again, I'm just sort of in the dark. I'm just shooting in the dark. But in India, it's about pride, right? When the car comes to your house, you take a photograph with that
Correct.
and everything. So probably Nano didn't understand that. So same thing with, so cheaper
Interesting.
doesn't essentially mean you will
So
get, and pricing higher doesn't essentially mean that you will not be able to differentiate and sell. That's what I'm saying. The mindset has to change.
so it's obviously it is clear that the pricing is not as straightforward as deciding whether you want to price low or want to price high. And towards the end of the book, or the the latter parts of the book, you talk about pricing strategies, and we most of us know about some pricing strategies such as cost plus pricing
Yeah,
and other things, but uh, you have, I think, a checklist that you also provide for people who can fill that out to get a sense of how much pricing power they'll have and what their pricing strategy should be. uh, why do you call some of those approaches as traditional pricing strategies? Can you talk a little bit about that, as well as what are
fascinating.
some of the newer or
Yeah,
more
yeah. So
what you call innovative pricing strategies?
yeah, yeah. So first thing is traditional doesn't mean bad or anything like that. I think they are traditional. They've been there for fairly long time, tried out, tested. So in a way, you can look at it as positive, right? So when we are talking of a new business or a product, we say, the fact that there is already some company in that market and they are selling means the market is established, right? So there is a positive element of that also. But these have existed for quite some time. For example, cost plus pricing, right? So it has existed for fairly long time now and became extremely dominant during the World War last century, when the governments were procuring, and the best way of avoiding a contract was to incentivize, saying, okay, you produce this maybe this tank, right, battle tank, and if it costs you X million dollars, we'll pay you maybe 20% more, right? And that was also a very quick
Correct.
way of, because at that point in time even the manufacturer may not know, the Germans and US and everybody needed those kind of equipments very fast, so they wouldn't know the price and there was no time to negotiate on that. So that's where it became very popular, and now even in government the mindset is around more of cost set. I think I can say with reasonable certainty is across the globe, right? By and large, that cost plus attitude is there in government across the globe. That's one thing. Second is, even in all the big businesses, they always compare and try to dive down and understand your cost. You have been in IT, I've been in IT for quite some time. Lot of times, every time there's a customer pressure to unbundle and tell them the this one. So I just 2-3 weeks back, we had one of the potential customers from Pune who actually came down to meet us, had a day long workshop with us, and me and my colleagues. So we gave them a proposal after a week or so. They were asking us to unbundle it, and we straight away refused, because you there is a whole price, and then there are once you start unbundling, there is no limit, right? They will ask for every detail, and then say, okay, now we don't want this, we don't want that, because it's a whole code that you have given to them. If you take out some components, doesn't mean that the price will reduce accordingly. But that cost plus kind of a mindset drives all those things. So these are not bad strategies. I think cost one has to take into account, because if you don't make profit, you might sort of run out of money, and you might have to close down the business. So I'm not saying ignore the cost, but one thing you have to understand is the price is not essentially linked to cost in the customer's mind, right? Customer is not going to pay you more because it costs you more to produce something, correct? Just because I tell customer, it cost me X amount to, let's say, produce this mouse, I'll say it cost me 5,000, you have to give me 6,000. And they will say, so what? I mean, Logitech is giving me at 500, right? So I think cost is more of whether, can I produce it at a cost that provides me profit, given this is the price, correct? It is actually the other way the thinking has to happen. And if I can't produce it at a cost where I can make profit, I should close down the business broadly, or I should outsource something like that, right? And get still the cost back. So that mindset has to change in the private enterprises, and we have to more look towards the I think what other metas are discussed, the modern or innovative kind of prices, where you link price to the value, because end of the day the customer is not going to pay you exactly as per cost, right? They are going to pay based on the value that they get out of it. And again, going too many examples we can give again, I think Wag Bakri chai, or even barista, or whatever, coffee day, or even Starbucks, right? People are willing to pay because that is the value that they feel they get. Yesterday or the day before yesterday, we were out with some friends, and we went to one shop where we had this mastani, right? It's quite popular in Pune. So it was very
Okay.
small cup, and it's a there's a Khatri, that they are the Khatri brand, right? They had actually a sort of they had this, they were selling this on a cart, right, for almost 50 years. That those guys, now they have got a very big shop, and they're pretty rich family now, selling ice creams, right? And after 30-40 years now, they have got their brand. and they are selling it at probably three times the price that others are selling. Right? It's such a small glass, and they are charging 100 120 bucks for that. Correct? Because now they have got that kind of a positioning. People know now the Khatri ice cream or Mastani means I'm going to get a great quality kind of a stuff. Right? So once it is there, then you are able to do that. So you have to differentiate the product. You have to look at the value that the customers are getting, and you have to charge accordingly. Traditional doesn't mean anything wrong, but cost should be more looked at from the point of view of, given this price, what is the cost at which I must produce in order to make profit, not the other way around. Simply because you
Hmm.
have got that cost, no, people are not going to pay for that. Probably you should not do that business if you can't produce. And that's exactly what happened with a lot of Indian manufacturers initially when China started, dumping their products here using something called a marginal pricing approach, right? Just to recover their fixed cost, they will dump in countries like India at a lower cost and sell at a higher price in the US and make profit over there.
Interesting. So, you know, let me now say that you obviously have had a lot of experience in industry. Then you wrote this book, and now you have your own firm, right? Where you give advice and consult for companies. How have you been able to, or can you tell me a little bit about how you have, bridged the gap between, what is there in the book and when theory meets practice?
Yeah, very. See, first thing I must say, it's very challenging, right? So I think I mentioned it in the book. Implementing right pricing strategy is extremely challenging. First, we have to understand, right? Just because I have written a book, I'll not say it's very easy and you can do it, right? It's very challenging job. It takes a lot of time to experiment and implement. And for example, if I, let's say, a customer comes to me and I tell him 1 lakh rupees for the engagement, right? There's a chance he will say no, right? Simply, and I have to be willing to take that chance. One thing. Second, I have to be able to, I have given those examples also. I have to be able to create different kind of, versions of the product. X, I'll charge you 1 lakh, and Y, I will charge you 70,000, and maybe if you just want Z, that's just 25,000, right? So I'm now able to create that and convince the customer that this is the high value and premium product, but other two choices are available to you, so you decide, right? Then the negotiation shifts to something else. He's trying to buy the high value at the middle price point, right? Rather than just argue that that price point is. And that is where the things like the anchoring and others that Kahneman has experimented a lot about, those come into picture, right? I also explained about this popcorn pricing strategy in the multiplexes, right? Typically, so a very large bowl, etc. So if you read through that, so we do use some part of it. For example, for my workshops, I hope people will not look at it that way now. I typically have a price. Let's say if it is 25,000, then there's a early bird discount, there's a group discount, right? So these kind of things are there, which basically help people buy at a lower price, and but there is already a higher anchor set in their mind. So I do use it partly, not that it's successful at first chance or every time successful, but I constantly try doing that. Second, if you look at the way the book is priced, there's a hardcover edition, there's a paperback, and there's Kindle, of course, right? So that's again one way of saying setting multiple layers of pricing. In my one of the ventures where we have called Skill Edge, where we are basically making the graduates job ready, day one job ready, right? So there we are now launching 2 3 courses where the our students who are basically MBA and PGDM freshers or engineers, they will pay only if they get the job of a particular salary, maybe 6 lakh rupee job. If they get that, then only they pay us, right? So it's a reverse kind of a pricing strategy where they are not paying us anything at all, right? So we're trying to use it in
Interesting.
different ways. And unless they get, let's say they get a job of 5 lakhs, they'll not pay us anything, right? So all 4 months of our investment is, for us, it is yielding zero, right? But he still gets a job, but he doesn't get a 6 lakh rupee job. He doesn't pay us anything, right? So we are turning the pricing around in this way. And of course, we are trying to use it because it conveys the value to the customer end of the day, what we are trying to do. And when we are, for example, setting this kind of a reverse, sort of inverted kind of a pricing strategy, where they pay us only if success based kind of a strategy, which also I have covered that in the book. Depending on the success, the customer can pay you. Then in that case, obviously, you can charge him higher amount. If I was going to charge them 1 lakh rupees for this course, probably I can charge them 1.5 lakh or 2 lakh rupees, because they pay only if we find them that kind of a job, right? And then people are willing to pay you because it is results based. right? So we are trying to use it as much as possible. Let's see. And it's not like it's all the way success. A lot of experimentation required, a lot of data required, and then most of my ventures are in nascent stage. But specifically, if you have been in business for quite some time, or you have some kind of a data, or your product, is a little bit low value product which sells a lot, then you can start getting the fillers earlier. In this kind of stuff, you can't get the fillers so easily.
Interesting. So, I can almost see a second book, coming out in the near future based on your more of your experiences. I'll be looking forward to that. Now, so now, Shailendra, we are a part of, Indic Book Club, and things we do, we also want to, I'm fascinated by few questions there. The first one is right at the very beginning of the book, you said this is your fourth book, but it is your first published book. So you obviously, you say that you started three books, but you couldn't finish them.
Yeah.
Uh, Firstly, how did you manage to finish this one? Because, if you've not finished three books, fourth book becomes more likely that you'll not finish it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so how did you end up finishing this fourth book? And tell me a little bit about your first three books.
Yeah. So I think, see, so first three that are work in progress even today, I feel ashamed of saying that, but it's truth, is they are fictions, right? So, and they are based on my all are based generally on the context of my financial services, technology, that kind of a background. Most of that, somebody working on developing cryptocurrency, for example, right? And then somewhere somebody is in the private equity field, and some kind of deal where mafia money is involved, so on and so forth, right? So these are fictions. I find it very challenging to write fiction, correct? So that is where probably they have been stuck. And then I didn't follow advice given by a lot of my friends and other people who have the experience in that, first draft, don't worry too much. The inability to write a really really bad first draft is what I'll say, is responsible for this. Be willing to just write trash, right? And then keep improving, because I think by and large, again, I'm getting convinced fiction has to be written like that, right? Because it keeps changing. By the time you write a whole sketch, and maybe 10 pages you write, what are those 20 chapters? By the time you are into the third chapter, everything starts changing, correct? Because it's fiction, you're also imagining it. That's where I got stuck. I didn't follow the advice of that vomit draft or whatever it is called, bad word to use, but just write the first one, right? So that's where I'm stuck. So I think I have to get out of that mentality of trying to be writing the best novel at the first this one, right? That I have to get out of that. This one came more easily because it's a non-fiction, right? So, and it's in an area which I understand very well. For me, it was just a matter of committing. And my coach, I had a coach for writing this book actually, who basically is a publisher. So Penman Books, if you look at them, so my friend Kailash, he guided me on that, and he made me commit on LinkedIn and Facebook to hundreds of people. That was one thing we did very bad, and and I was like, I was forced to write it in a way. Then I took like 45 days, and almost, it was really, really back-breaking, right? Right from morning 6, 7, 8 in the to 10 o'clock in the night. And almost in 45 days, I finished it. I knew there is no other way I'm going to do this. Such a concentrated and sort of highly focused 45 days, then I could finish this. And I think I took maybe 7-10 days for revision and so on and so forth, but it was done. But it is a non-fiction which I find much easier to write. So that's why I have another non-fiction in my mind, but I've been postponing that because I wanted to finish the fictions, which feels very bad, three books and all that. So you started and then you haven't finished that. But again, now I'm veering back to, if I'm not finishing those, should I write the second one, right? The other one, which is fully sketched out, if I really put 2 months of effort, is done, right? So my struggle is with writing fiction basically, and that's why those three are in incomplete stage. And because it keeps evolving. There's no end to the kind of imagination. It keeps running wild. I don't know where to check it.
That is so true. Perhaps we need to make you commit publicly to, I think, finishing your fiction book
Oh
also.
no, I have committed, and 31st March is the date, and it's not going to happen. I did commit.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
we can
very
get
bad.
some of our Indic community to push and pressurize you into finishing that book by the 31st of March. Uh, so Uh, I want to ask maybe one more question, which is now you said you committed yourself to a 40-45 day writing session and you wrote it. Any advice to people who are writing nonfiction? And I'm sure there are a lot of people who have a lot of insights and knowledge that they want to share, but they're not sure whether a full length book is the right way to go. What is your advice to them?
I lost you partly. I mean, I couldn't hear you towards the end.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll repeat my question. So, for people who want to write a nonfiction book, they may have a lot of knowledge and insights to share, but they're not sure whether a full length book is the right way to go. What is your advice to them?
Yeah. So I think yes. So the meat has to be there. You can't just write a book and make it like 45, 50,000 words, for example, right? If the meat is not there, I think so. There is a very clear approach to writing a non-fiction book, right? A very, very clear approach. You know how to do it step by step. That is possible. In the fiction, it is. I'm not able to implement that. Probably the same approach can be done in fiction, and I tried that, but I haven't been able to get through. The very step by step approach that is possible, and if you are generally disciplined, not extremely highly disciplined also, generally disciplined and willing to commit, I think you should be able to write. Now whether that will convert into a full-fledged book, I'm not really sure about it, but I think non-fiction books have been written which are 100 pages, 50 pages, 200, 300, 500 pages, so that's not a challenge really, right? So if you think that this particular subject you can do justice to it in 150 or maybe 100 pages, etc., I think go ahead and do that nonetheless, correct? But there is a way of doing it. I'll just describe it in bits and pieces. Clearly identify your audience, right? Who are you talking to? For example, for me it is entrepreneurs by and large, right? And some amount of corporate executives. And then the second thing is write the first case, or what are the first topics, how you are going to divide the book, for example, introduction. Then I spoke about what is pricing, why is it important, and it's fairly logical actually, right? And then third thing is write down the in each chapter, write down the questions that you as a leader would like to be answered, right? So when I am writing about pricing as a leader, I will have some of the questions, right? What exactly is pricing? Why is it important? Correct? How does it work? Right? Is it a art? Is it a science? Right? So those questions come to my mind as a reader. So then I go and write those questions and I answer it. Correct? And first draft you do like this. Even let's say pricing strategies, right? So I'll just write down what are the different prices. I just first wrote down some 40 pricing strategies, and then the idea to classify them came in my mind. Right? Then traditional etc. evolved. Then I thought let me develop a checklist. So it is possible to do in a fairly methodical way, because you are the subject matter expert, right, on a topic that you are totally comfortable with. Because I have done workshops on pricing, I advise people on pricing, so I'm very comfortable with the topic, right? I have read at least 10 books on pricing, right? So you should read in that area, definitely. I'm not saying all this is my innovation or something, nothing like that, correct? I read authors who write, like Kahneman, for example. He has written about pricing, at least quite a few experiments he has written, right? And there are people like Bouter and others who have written actually very good books on pricing. Read that as well, and then in your own way structure and present it. It is possible to do that, and it's relatively straightforward as compared to a fiction, but that is my experience. I know you wrote a fiction first, so maybe your point of view could be different, right? So but that's just my experience.
Right now, what you say makes a whole lot of sense, right? Right. So you've said read a lot on the subject, write
Absolutely.
what you know best, uh, do ask the questions that a reader would want to know, and give advice. So,
Yeah.
Shailendra, before we, so first of all, thank you so much for coming on the Indic Book Club Author Q&A. And your book, Price to Profit, Grow Your Business Profitably, is, very, very logically, methodically organized book, of a lot of good, useful information in it,
Thanks.
and a lot of examples and quotes, from business leaders that resonate a lot. I would definitely encourage people go take a copy of it. It is available on Amazon, and as you said, it is available in both physical as well as Kindle ebook forms. So, in closing, any comments, any final words?
Yeah, I think again, I mean, I know the goal of Indic Book Club is to encourage people to write, right? So that's one. Obviously, I think more around Indic topics. I'm not really an expert in those areas, so I'm not thinking of that. But I think yes, take inspiration from others. They say there is a book inside everyone, right? So I didn't know. I thought this is just some GAN somewhere, but when I wrote it, I found it to be true. So I think yeah, go ahead and write a book. Don't think of who will read it, right? If it's a good book, some people will read it and you will get the satisfaction of having done really something concrete. I mean, for me this is really something very very concrete, and now this can translate into a lot of intangible benefits also, right? So there is a intangible benefit to that because you establish your credibility if you're writing about a topic, let's say pricing or let's say finance or anything like that. So it establishes your credibility. You become much more confident articulating that topic. You research for writing that book, right? So a lot of intangible benefits are there around that. So don't think too much. If you think that really it is worth writing a book, go ahead and write it. Don't spend too much time thinking. At best what you will do is maybe 3 4 months you will do some hard work on something, and maybe you will think that it is not worth it, which is okay. I mean, it's rather than constantly thinking about will I do it or not. And again, when I'm saying this, I'm telling this to myself as well, trying to convince myself, go ahead and finish
True.
that fiction. But that which I'm finding challenging. Yeah.
No, very, very sensible, practical advice, Shailendra. So thank you again for coming to the Indic Book Club Q&A. And so thank you, Shailendra.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Abhinav. Good night. Bye.